Are you all able to see my toolbar at the top?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Soon to be afternoon. We will get started with the virtual art talk in just a couple of minutes. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hi, everyone. We're just giving people a couple minutes to get logged in for the virtual art talk program that will start in just about 1 minute. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Haggerty. I'm here with the Heard Museum, and thanks so much for joining us for our continuing series of virtual art talks. I have the great pleasure of welcoming our presenters today. We have with us the Heard Museum's Assistant Curator, Velma Key Craig, and as well as Dr. David Martinez, who's Professor of American Indian Studies at Arizona State University and a longtime partner of the Heard Museum. We're so grateful for both of them being with us today. And they're going to be talking about the exhibition Arriving Forever into the Present World, which is closing on Sunday, December 10th. So I know you're going to learn a lot from today's presentation and want to see it again. I hope you'll come in to see it before it closes. This Sunday is the last day the exhibition will be on view. And as always, with all of the material presented in our virtual art talk series, I encourage you to follow up your program today by visiting the Heard Museum's Billie Jane Bagley Library and Archives. The library is a free resource. It's open to the public from Monday through Friday, and it's really a fantastic place to learn more about the artists and the works represented in the museum collection and the things that you hear on programs like this one. Virtual arts talks are made possible thanks to the support that we receive from Heard Museum members. If you're not a museum member, we're wrapping up our fall acquisition, our membership drive, and we'd love for you to be part of the Heard family. Members get special discounts, free admission to the museum every day, 10% daily discount in the museum shop, and many other benefits. This is a great time of year to use your discount in the holiday shopping. And we encourage you also to consider maybe giving a gift of museum membership. You can pick up nicely packaged gift memberships in our shop or in Books and More. You can also purchase online. And if you haven't seen the Heard's brand new website, it just launched this week. So please check it out. We've added some really exciting and dynamic new content. And you can, of course, also use your member discount in the online shop. So before I introduce our program and our guests again, or give it over to our guests, just a few housekeeping notes. Today, the presentation is a webinar, so you're only going to see the faces of the presenters. If you would like to propose a question, please feel free to pose a question in the chat box or in the Q&A. We'll be monitoring those, and we will do our best to pose the questions during the discussion today. And finally, the caption service here on Zoom is available. If you'd like to use captioning, just turn them on at the menu bar on the bottom of your screen. You'll see the closed caption button. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the Heard Museum's Assistant Curator, Velma Key Craig. Velma?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Velma Key Craig. I'm assistant curator here at the Heard Museum. I am Danae, and it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. David Martinez. So for the exhibition, Arriving Forever into the Present World, Dr. Martinez was an advisor and worked with us in the planning stages and throughout for the development of this exhibition. I'll read his bio and then I'll turn it over to David to introduce himself further if he'd like. But let me read this here. So David Martinez, Akimel Atam, Haichet Atam, and Mexican, is Professor of American Indian Studies and Transborder Studies. He is the author of Dakota Philosopher, Charles Eastman, and American Indian Thought, Life of the Indigenous Mind, Vine Deloria Jr., and the Birth of the Red Power Movement. My Heart is Bound Up with Them, How Carlos Montezuma Became the Voice of a Generation, and the editor of the American Indian Intellectual Tradition, an anthology of writings from 1772 to 1972. Professor Martinez is also the director and founder of the Institute for Transborder Indigenous Nations, which is housed in the School of Transborder Studies, where it focuses on the indigenous nations impacted by the U.S.-Mexico border. So that is at the Arizona State University here in Tempe. Professor Martinez?
Well, thank you for that generous introduction. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this virtual art talk. It's an honor and a pleasure. I just want to add to my bio, which I wrote myself, and so I'm aware of the gaps in the information. I do have publications in Indigenous art history, which is one of the reasons why the Heard Museum has asked me to partner with them on numerous occasions. I also have a number of publications, and all of them history as well. And I'm currently working on a book about the history of the Yachtja, the first chapter of which has just been published in the current issue of the Journal of Arizona History. And so I encourage those of you who have access to that journal to check out that article. I'm quite proud of this work, and so I'm hoping to promote it as much as possible as symbolic of the kind of work that I'm doing today. And so with that, I'll turn it back to you, Velma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so quite a lot of, a lot of works there that you've written. We're very, as I mentioned before, we're very happy to have you on board with us and working with us so closely on many different projects. Before Arriving Forever into the Present World, Dr. Martinez contributed to the exhibition catalog for an exhibition titled Larger Than Memory. And the exhibition catalog was published in 2020. There you go. And the title of the exhibition is Arriving into the Present World, Indigenous Time Traditions and the Artistic Imagination. So from that title is that later became the title to the current exhibition, which is on view now and will be closing this Sunday. So David, will you share a little bit about Indigenous time traditions or this essay?
Sure. I should point out that the title itself is derived from a long poem that Octavio Paz published, I think it was 1956, 1957. I had many years ago written my dissertation about Octavio Paz. I actually have a PhD in philosophy from Stony Brook, and so my original scholarly and academic identity was in that field. And so when I was asked to contribute an essay for this exhibit catalog, Larger Than Memory, I started pondering the issue of contemporary art and what contemporary means to Indigenous people. And that led me to reflect on this earlier research that I did long ago as a grad student, in which that I guess that problem of how to define Indigenous time, was a part of my thinking and part of the work that I was trying to develop. And so that discourse, those reflections inform this essay. So that poem is about the Aztec sunstone. And that sunstone symbolizes the Aztec or Nahua notion of time, which is nonlinear in the sense that, say, Western time is linear, beginning from 1 AD to the present. In the case of Nahua time, it's circular in the sense that the years keep repeating themselves over and over again into infinity. And that formed the basis of how I started thinking about the problem of contemporaneity in Indigenous art. And what I started to realize, and this is what this essay is about, is that time, even though it sounds abstract and absolute and shouldn't be anything that there's any controversy about, what I realized is that the way in which we talk about time, as individual, as people, as community, often relies on social or cultural conventions. So in the case of the contemporary, in the case of what is Indigenous art in the 21st century, all of these questions, are posed on the assumption that the Western notion of time is an absolute and it's a given. So what this essay argues is that Western time, its Gregorian heritage based in the Christian tradition is not a given. It's not an absolute. It's actually a colonial fiction. It's a Christian fiction that the year 2023 that we're in now exists because another civilization, very alien civilization, set the standard for how to keep time for all of us. And so the essay is about how other people, other cultures, including Indigenous cultures, have different ways of talking about time and history, and not to mention the future, that is based on our own oral traditions, our own language, our own relationship to our homelands. So for me, as an Akinmala of them, I started thinking about how does time look from the vantage point of somebody who keeps a calendar stick. And for those of you who are not acquainted with that tradition, calendar stick is saguaro rib, or me, a little lazy tongue right now. Saguaro rib on which symbols are etched into it, and each symbol, evokes the most important event of the past year for that village, and that village that's keeping that stick. And so our concept of history is very much grounded on where we live, what village we're from, and it's true for all the villages. So what that means is that you have a plurality of histories. You have a plurality of how time is perceived, by the many different villages that make up the Aldamjebit, the homeland. And so what's true for us is also true for other Indigenous peoples who have timekeeping traditions, like the Lakota winter count, for example. And so if instead of the Western notion of time, we start looking at our own notions of time, then the question of what is contemporary Indian art starts to look a little different, and starts to look like a misguided question. And so I basically challenge using Western language like contemporary or modern or traditional, and instead encourage us as Indigenous people, as Indigenous artists, as Indigenous thinkers, to reflect on, well, how do we talk about these things if we can't use the white man's language?
I was going to ask you, one of the quotes that I pulled from your essay, the essay that's on the screen there, it says, "For many, even today, the difference between traditional and modern is the same as between the archaic and obsolete on the one hand, and the new and innovative on the other hand." I pulled this because it's discussing or bringing to light, this quandary of when we're looking at art, or when we're looking at things through a Western lens, Indigenous creations, there is a real difference in, I guess, perception. So, what you're saying here with this, well, you can go ahead and talk about what this statement is saying, but, just this idea of progress being determined by a rejection of something in the past, and how that doesn't necessarily apply universally to every culture. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. One of the recurring problems that we in the Indigenous community face when trying to work with the museums and galleries, or even educational institutions in the mainstream world, is this issue of evolution. A lot of the criticisms or complaints about the way in which Indigenous art of whatever variety is exhibited is that it often winds up on this evolutionary scale, that goes from primitive, to modern, to futuristic. And that's a problem for Indigenous art and artists, because the belief that progress is technologically driven, you're advanced and modern based on the type of technology that you use, doesn't apply, or is not helpful at understanding the value of an Indigenous art. Because when you look at the way we talk about our own work and our own culture, we do not use evolutionary language, right? And so when it comes to notions like primitive art, historic concept, so that makes sense if you're a Western historian grounded in the Western intellectual tradition, but it's utter nonsense when it comes to the Indigenous point of view on those same traditions. I don't think we ever work for primitive, or at least in all of them. I could not tell you what the word for primitive is in our language, because we just don't have that concept. We have words for baskets. We have words for the material, the plant material that makes up the basket. We have a sense that the things that we're making may have been taught to us by our elders and ancestors. We have a sense that new material, maybe imported from outside or brought in from outside, is now available to us. And maybe we choose, on a personal or communal basis, to include these things in the way that we express ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But,
so as you can see, I'm sorry, David, I just cut you off.
That's okay. I made my point.
So you did ask a couple questions in your essay, and I'm not gonna make you answer them today, but one of those is you asked, do Indigenous languages even have a word for modern or contemporary? And just now you said for autumn there was no word for primitive either. Well, just out of curiosity, I went to the internet, the Gillespie Navajo English dictionary, and looked up words for contemporary and modern and primitive for Navajo, and I didn't find a translation there either, but I could be wrong, and I'll keep asking. So I want to go ahead and go to the next slide, because we kind of skipped over a lot. So David, has been on board with this development of this exhibition from the very beginning. And we started out actually 1 year ago today. This is the exact day that this picture was taken. So we've totally done a full circle. So this was our planning meeting that we had with a few of our past Andrew W. Mellon fellows and myself and David Martinez in the workroom, when we were just hashing out just a lot of these concepts, and we had just a discussion with one another about all sorts of things. So two of these Andrew W. Mellon Fellows are currently on our staff. Olivia Barney and Roshai Montano, they both work with collections management, and Will Ridingen moved on to another museum. It was really nice to have this discussion with them. So over the year, we've had many contributors to this exhibition. I don't have photos of our current, or actually last year's Andrew W. Mellon Fellows, but we also had a lot of input from Samana Thompson, who is Autumn, and Rebecca Peshlikai, who is in her second year of the fellowship, who is Dine. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Or David, did you want to have it say anything about our first meeting or the very initial discussions?
Well, I suppose I can clarify that my role as a consultant largely consisted of coming in as shown here and going over the draft of the grant application that was shared with me. And we had a roundtable discussion of the ideas and issues and problems that narrative generated. And so I guess you could say that I played my role of college professor and contributed to opinions and insights, but also tried to further our thinking by asking probing questions about what is it that we're trying to do here. It was a very nice experience.
These are just a few snapshots of the exhibition. Is on view downstairs currently in the Lavina Old Gallery, which is a smaller gallery, but we have a gallery guide included, and it's right on the wall, so visitors can take it home with them and read it. But this gallery guide is just a republishing of the essay Arriving Forever into the Present World. It's a little different from the original essay, which was published in the exhibition catalog for Larger Than Memory. We took out mostly things that pertain specifically to the past exhibition, because visitors to this current exhibition, we didn't want to confuse anyone. But so it is down there, mostly full. This is an excerpt of the poem that David Martinez referred to, written by Octavio Paz. This is a translation of it. And the poem was La Piedra del Sol, translated to mean sunstone in English. And this translation was translated by Elliot Weinberger. But I really, thought that this section of the poem was fitting because it is the first 6 lines as well as the last 6 lines, and so visually, the poem is formatted so that it returns to the beginning. Myself, as I started out as a literature major, and I do enjoy reading poetry, so things like that are always things that I like to kind of, they inspire me and they interest me. And as sort of a counter to the Western linear timeline that David has been discussing recently, we try to think about ways to incorporate, this idea of time not necessarily having to be understood or relayed in a linear manner. The Andrew W. Mellon Fellows, Samana Thompson, Rebecca Peshlikai, and myself thought about ways to convey a more circular, vision of what time looks like. And so one that we included on the main label here is the autumn version. So what we developed for the autumn. So it's divided up into seasons. We really felt strongly about including the autumn language. So we have the autumn language for the different months of the year around the edge on the outside of the circle. And then the English translations as to what the autumn names are translated to. And then we have a few events that happen throughout the year, and we fit them into the different seasons, so as close to possible as where they would be practiced. And we arranged it so that the new moon, or I'm sorry, the new year was positioned at the top. And what we hope to convey is just, and it's very subtle. We didn't explain this in the text anywhere, but, with the many cultures that are presented within all of the galleries at the Heard Museum, each and every culture is distinct. Each and every culture has their own different traditions, and there are similarities, but there are also differences. And here, the autumn, New Year, as is relayed here on this time circle, is in the summertime, so in June. And that's, of course, different from, Western, which is January 1st. Did you have anything to add, David?
Well, I should explain further that my critique of Western linear time is inspired by Vine Deloria's Jr.'s book, God is Red, because he focuses in on the Christian timeline, which he regards as being the original linear timeline. And what characterizes or defines a linear concept of history is that it's history that happens with a purpose. And so in the case of Christianity, not to go on too long about this, you begin with creation, Genesis, it moves on through events like the flood, the Ten Commandments. And then you have the story of Jesus, including his crucifixion and resurrection, along with the prophecies in the book of Revelations. And so ultimately everything is moving towards this apocalyptic end. Vine argues that paradigm, if you will, informs other Western concept of history, whether it's their notion of progress, whether it's their notion of evolution. Even if the time is perfectly secular, it's often in the Western imagination defined from a primitive stage to a more advanced stage, where that advanced stage fulfills some kind of a destiny. You don't get that kind of time in indigenous thinking, including the Alden way of thinking that's illustrated here. Our concept of history, Alden history, as illustrated here, is this perpetual turning of the seasons. There's no apocalypse, there's no second coming, there's no utopia, that is at the end of the road, because it's not a road. And so I just wanted to point that out. I mean, we understand what linear time is, but it's a tradition that is imposed on us. It's not something that originated with people.
Thank you so much for that clarification, David. So I will move on to the next couple slides. All that these are installation views. So you can see the circular timeline. It's not the time circle is on the main label for the exhibition. And then I just have two gallery views, just wide shots, so that you can see the layout. We would, of course, love you to visit before Sunday, though. My favorite thing, I mean, we get a lot of comments on the wall color, and I'm wearing green today because green is one of my favorite colors. But the reason behind the color choice, Professor Martinez, would you like to iterate?
My peculiar taste in gallery decor. I thought it would be appropriate to choose a color that evoked the fertility of the earth itself, of nature. Because when I look at the objects on this display, I think of their connection to the homelands that they represent to the earth itself. And so I thought that an earthier color would evoke the organic quality that each one of these items embodies. Not to say that the human component isn't on full display as well. I guess in my mind, you know, the ambiance of the green not only evoke the natural material of the items on display, but also the organic role that humans or artists play in the creation of these things, that the impulse to make art is as natural as flowers blooming or trees growing, things like that.
So so we're trying to figure out, I guess, ways to tell the various stories that we're portraying through these objects about our different cultures and about our different experiences. One of the things that we tried very hard to do was to not group items according to culture. I mean, they do get grouped that way, a little bit, but we wanted everything to sort of mingle as well, because just as the artificial linear timeline that we're also accustomed to, that has been made to feel like it is natural, like this placement of things within boundaries and into classifications or into certain groupings, they are also artificial, and they are also restrictive. So we're all aware of the many different cultures that live here in Arizona, and how just this intermingling naturally happened and occurred. I think a lot of times the easiest way to tell, so we have in this exhibition, we have objects from Diné, Navajo, we have objects from Akimelentohana O'odham, and Kapo'awenge, Pueblo. And so when you have a mixture of objects from different cultures, I mean, it would be very easy to just place Navajo here, O'odham here, and Kapo'awenge here, and so forth. But that doesn't necessarily allow for a more complex telling of stories, which is what we're trying to convey here. So grouping things thematically sometimes helps, and I think we try to do that in this room. So there's a slight mixing of objects from different cultures, or the placement. I mean, it's very I'm happy with it. Do you notice anything else about maybe the display or presentation that you thought might be interesting to our viewers?
Well, as I understood the issue that you raised with respect to grouping items according to culture, one of the things that we were, as a group, attempting to achieve with this exhibit is getting away from the kind of taxonomy that is commonplace in the anthropological literature. If you're acquainted with all of the reports that the Bureau of American Ethnology published during the late 19th, early 20th century, that's the way that anthropologists write. They put everything into these scientific categories. And so that established this tradition that if you're going to talk about Indian culture, you have to use the methods and categories that are approved, that are validated by the anthropological sciences. And obviously that puts a lot of limitation on the viewer's ability to understand these individual works of art, as being expressions, worlds unto themselves, that reflect the artist, their culture too, but also the modern dynamic world in which we all live, which is not based on staying within our little categories, but interacting with each other, both within our communities, between Native communities, as well as the non-Native world. So as I understood what we were trying to accomplish here is trying to remind ourselves that, we're more than just members of our tribes.
Mhm.
We're not walking stereotypes, that we live complicated lives, and those complications of living in the modern world inform the work that we do, including our issues with being Indian in this country. We haven't talked about the impact of colonization. We haven't talked about the impact of social and environmental injustice, on all of us. And that's something that we were hoping to evoke in this exhibit as well. There's reason why, for example, all of them women make baskets for the marketplaces, because they needed to fend for themselves. And so they engaged in basket making in a way that, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, defied the expectations of our tradition. We make baskets for our own use. We make baskets for ceremonial purpose. We make baskets to trade with people. But making baskets for the open market where people pay money, I mean, that was a new concept that we had to deal with, and we had to deal with it because of the imposed poverty that we had to live with, in the reservation system. So the scars of our colonization, in my mind, are evident all over this exhibit.
Awesome. So we can just scroll through the next slides. This is just O'odham objects that are on view. We have, a few from living or artists that are identified. Dorothy Lopez created this basket in 1973. Then this one, Dolores Stevens. This basket is from 1974. We also didn't arrange anything chronologically. We let them land where they landed. Next. In this vitrine, we have 3 smaller baskets, very finely woven, one by Evelyn Ramon, which is horsehair, and then 2 Akimel O'odham baskets by weavers whose names were not recorded. And I'm going through a little quick here. This is an Akimel O'odham basket by an unnamed weaver as well, and then I placed that next to a basket woven by Annie Antone more recently. And then lastly, we have, second to lastly, this is a wine basket from the early 1900s. It's very big. I think this is my favorite object. And then two baskets woven by male weavers, which are, in the O'odham culture, the basket weaving is traditionally taken over by women or done by women, practiced by women. But Terrell Dew Johnson is a weaver who is practicing today, and he does very experimental works. This one is made with eucalyptus panels sewn together by bear grass and sinew. And then the wire basket has its own history, developed by male O'odham weavers, but I placed these together just because they were both woven by male basket weavers. But I wanted to leave some time for Professor Martinez to talk about one of the last things that we developed for the exhibition, or in conjunction with the exhibition, was a new essay. Do you want to talk about your new essay, David?
Sure. The new essay is titled 3 Native Muses, and that refers to the 3 types of items that are on display in the exhibit: basketry, weaving, and pottery. And what the essay is about, I mean, it's inspired by this exhibit, of course, and all the discussions that I've had with everyone involved. But what it's really about is the concept of museum and how this concept has been adopted into our thinking about indigenous art. And so it's one of these institutions, like a lot of institutions in our world today, in our indigenous world today, that we have adopted, in many cases forced on us, from our colonizer. So in this case, our notion of museum largely comes from the Americans who explored and occupied our land and put our items, into their collections and their museums. And so we have museums in the Indian community today. I am a lot of reservations have museums, and including my own at Gila River. And so what the essay is about is it's about what my experience going to reservation museums did to inform my influence, my understanding of this institution museum. It's like when I think about a museum, I think about the little tiny museums. It doesn't exist anymore. That was in the Arts and Crafts Center in Casablanca Village, just off I-10 freeway. It had a small collection, as all of them items. The exhibits never changed ever, which is typical of a lot of reservation museums. And yet they're an important part of our communities because one, when these museums were created, usually in the early 70s, it was a development, an important development in our sovereignty as peoples. Like, this museum is ours. We're designing it. We're going to determine what items go into the exhibits, what items are going to be collected, how the information cards, are going to be written. It was all about us. And so these museums became important landmarks. They became places where, you bring family or bring visitors. It's a regular part of our landscape today. And so I reflected on that as a way of reflecting on the phenomenon of museums and the institution of Indian art, that dominates our lives today. And so when it comes to indigenizing places like the Hurt Museum, which I work with regularly, when you ask me, what does that mean? And I start thinking about, well, what did we do back home? What did each of us do back home that made these places our own, that made us proud of these places? And so what the paper argues is that the basis on which we indigenize museums like the Herd, I think is ultimately influenced by what we experience as community members, as family members, going to our own museums. That set the standard of what we expect to see. We expect to see our own faces looking back at us.
Well, I'm very interested or excited to read the article when it is published. Where will it be published and when?
Yeah, I did forget to mention that, didn't I? It's going to come out in the American Indian Quarterly in their winter issue. So probably a year from today. So another full circle.
Okay, we'll have to wait. And I wrote the afterword for the essay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Very short, 5 pages. And I did enjoy that. So I'm glad that I had the opportunity. So thank you. I have a question. I don't see any questions coming in from the audience. Maybe they will trickle in soon, but I do want to make room for them. But I do have a question for you. In your essay, Arriving Forever, that we were talking about at the beginning of this hour, you asked some questions. One was, if someone were still maintaining a history stick among the O'odham, what notches would be carved to signify the important events of recent years? So, and I think you did mention this earlier today, but So I'm curious, David, what notches would you include in a history stick if you were the keeper of one?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I suppose that I would try to take the vantage point of where my family is from, which is in Gila Crossing. And so that's in the west side of the Gila River Reservation. It's near Levine. I would probably try to think about the most significant event that happened to us over there. And so right now, I think we have a new market that's opening. And so that's an event that would probably, because it's going to impact us all. And so I would probably gravitate towards items, albeit modern, but are very much a part of our life today. And so the little market in the west end of the reservation would probably be the notch I put into my stick.
That's a fun one. Would you include the introduction of museums to Atam?
Well, if the original history sticks, they were very provincial in the sense that they were only limited to the villages in which they were kept. And so if there's any attempt to revitalize that tradition today, I suppose there would be an attempt to maintain that village-based focus. But what complicates the question that you're asking me, what makes it interesting, is that obviously everywhere that we live today, including on the reservation, is exposed to a lot of outside influences, right? And so contemporary, to use that word, contemporary calendar stick would probably have to include developments off reservation, as part of the people's history. And so if you include all that's happened to us, say over the last couple of generations, there would probably be calendar sticks that had notches for the casinos that we've built, because those things definitely impact us all, and the schools that we've built. There probably, especially on the west end of the reservation, probably be notches for the struggle to protect South Mountain.
Wonderful. Well, we just have 10 minutes left. I don't know. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay. Yeah, I don't see any in the chat room or in the Q&A box. I have a quote that I especially like that towards the end of the essay, and I'll read it. It says, "From the vantage point of indigenous time traditions, we are still in the domain of the first storytellers, the ones who handed down the epic accounts of previous worlds, the kinship relations that they created, and the ceremonial life that keeps people centered." I just thought that was a really poignant thought, and I don't think that I'd have ever considered that. But yeah, I think we are. I agree. Did you want to add a little bit more to maybe that thought?
Well, I guess I wrote that observation as a way of reminding myself, and hopefully my readers, especially Indigenous readers, that despite all this pressure on us to think about ourselves, on this linear journey towards modern, postmodern, futuristic times, that no matter how much of the white man's technology we adopt into our lives, and we've adopted quite a bit, we still have a contemporary tie to our origin stories, to our ancestors, that never becomes obsolete, that never becomes part of the past. It's an eternal part of the now in which we live.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your participation just throughout the whole process, and then also for sharing all of your amazing thoughts here today with us. Did you have anything that you wanted to share, maybe just about a current project or a future project?
I just want to add to viewers out there that if you want to contact me, if you're too shy to ask a question today, email me at david.martinez.3@asu.edu. That's my university address. I'll be more than happy to dialogue with you about anything. But thank you so much.
We do have one question, and I'm unsure what it's referring to. Terry Stanley writes, will this concept be utilized in future exhibits, similar themes in the Grand Gallery exhibit?
That's to you.
Okay, well, I'll figure out what that answer from me might be. Aside from that, yes, the exhibition is on view currently and will be closing Sunday, December 10th. So if you are local and in the Valley, please come down and see Arriving Forever into the Present World at the Heard Museum in the Lavina Old Gallery. And I'll turn it over to Dan for any closing comments.
Well, we want to thank you, Dr. Martinez. Thank you, Velma. I learned so much, as I always do in these programs, and we're just excited to see and read your upcoming essay, David. And I should share, I'll close by saying that our viewers and visitors will have a chance to see other Otham baskets and additional baskets in an exhibition coming up that opens on February 2nd here at the Heard Museum of the Basha collection, the Basha family collection baskets that have been gifted along with other works to the museum's collection. So please come see Arriving Forever in the Present World into the Present World before it closes. And in the same gallery space, you'll enjoy an upcoming exhibition on basketry. So with that, David, thank you so much for your time today. This was fascinating, and we want to thank everyone for joining us. Have a great week.
Thank you.